Hello YouTube, thought I'd do a quick video here. Today I'm going to show you how to figure out your microphone pinout on your mobile two-way radio so that you can hook it up to an interface board, or maybe you want to experiment with different things, or whatever the case may be. How do you figure out the mic pinout? Now, the first thing that I tell people to do is always look in the owner's manual. It may tell you in there. Now I'm going to show you what I mean by that. If we go to the, in this particular owner's manual here, this is the Retevis RT9000D. And what page am I on? Page 14. I zoomed in here. It tells me what the mic pinout is on my RJ45, which is really nice. This makes it a lot easier. Now, if the owner's manual does not tell you this info, you could try emailing the manufacturer and say, hey, I have model such and such. I need to know the mic pinouts. And hopefully they'll get back with you fairly quick. Now, in this particular case, let's say the owner's manual does show you the mic pinouts. So now what do you do? What's the next step? So what we're going to do here is I'm going to explain. This is going to be like a kind of a two-part video. The first part, I'm going to explain how to do this if you have the information. The second part of this in this video is going to be how to figure it out if you don't have this information or you cannot get this information. And the second part is you got to take the microphone apart. You're going to need an ohm meter and a voltmeter or a multimeter. But let's say, for an example, that you're able to get the information. Either it's in the owner's manual or you email the manufacturer and they write it back to you. So now you got the information. So now here's the next thing you're going to need to do. Let's go to the camera. Now, if it's an RJ45 type of connector on your radio, you are probably wondering, well, how do I do this? You don't want to never cut your microphone cord, obviously. So we're going to use a cable that has an RJ45 on it. Now you're probably wondering, well, where do I get this? Well, the good news is the RJ45 cable is a standard network cable that we use here. We can use a cable like this. So what you do is you figure out what length you're going to need, and then you cut it, and you splice back the wires on the other end. So here's my example cable, but you can cut it to whatever length you want. Now we have a cable that we can plug into the radio, and now we have wires we can hook up to the interface board or to do whatever we want to do. Now, here is an important thing that you have to keep in mind. When you look at, let's go back to the computer. When you look at this, pay attention to, let me get my fancy pen here. Pay attention and how this connector is being viewed in the picture. Notice the tab is on the left hand side. This is the tab. Okay? So what I mean by that is, when I say tab, let's go back to the camera. Let me get my cursor here. And let's go back to the down camera. What I mean by tab is the little tab. See that right here? This. Okay. So in the picture you just saw, they show the connector. If you're looking at it in the front like this, the tab is on this side. Okay, let's go back to that picture. See that? So now when we plug this into a radio, we got to pay attention how that tab is going. What I mean is, some radios you plug it in, the tab, like this is the cable, the tab may be on top of the radio, or the tab may be on the bottom. But you got to pay attention where that tab is at when it's in the radio, so you can make sure you get the cables to match up. So in this case, we look at this diagram, and it looks like if you have the tab facing the way they show you, pin, and we're only concerned about certain pins. The pins we do not care about in this particular case. I'm going to cross them off here. we do not care about the keypad. We don't care about that pin. We don't care about the 5 volt, but we got to be aware of it. Because if you flip this around or you get mixed up and you put 5 volts into your little circuit or interface board, you could damage it. So you got to be aware of that. Pin 7 is 5 volt, but we don't care about it, but we just got to be mindful of it. We don't care about the channel down, and we don't care about the channel up. We don't care about none of this. We only care about the mic ground, mic in, PTT, and ground. Usually these mic ground and ground are the same. They're the same connection usually. But these are the pins we need to care about. We don't care about the channel up and down. We don't care about the data. We don't care none of that. We just want to know about these pins. We want to get this radio to key up. That's what we're trying to do. What pins do we need to key up? Well, we need the PTT pin. We need a ground pin. Then we want sound to work. Well, that's where the microphone and the microphone ground come into play. So, looking at this, holding this connector this way, ground, PTT, mic in, mic ground. So, if we go to the, let's get fancy here. Let me go ahead and get my cursor. Let's go to the microscope. Maybe I can show you better on there. So let me get the microscope here fired up. And we're going to show you what I kind of mean. Let's go to here. Now, when we, remember the picture showed us looking at it like this. I'm going to try to do this as best I can. May not be the best way of doing this, but hopefully you get the idea. Okay, so let's see if we can focus this better. Okay, there we go. That's how the picture is showing us. So if we go by the picture that we have, and we go to this pin here, according to that data, was ground. This right here, the next one, is PTT. The next one is mic in. Next one's mic out. So if we look at the cable that we're going to use, the one that we cut the end off, and we look at this side of the cable, really cool. If we look on that side, the color, the beauty of this cable, the connector is clear. We can see the color. So if I focus this better here, it looks like in this cable that I'm using, the white wire, it might be a white wire with a brown stripe. I'll have to look at it closely. This white wire right here looks like, I don't know if there's a stripe on it or not, but you have to look at it real carefully. You may need a magnifying glass, but this white wire is our ground, because if you hold the connector like this, and it's on this side. So the white wire, and I kind of used this cable already for some of my videos, and it looks like I'm looking at it more closely. It's hard to see it. It looks like it's going to be the white wire with an orange stripe. You probably can't see that in the microscope, but it's a white wire with an orange stripe. So I find that white wire, the orange stripe over here. Right there it is. That's my ground. Okay? So you can see with these clear connectors, you can see the color of the wire. So that's how you can figure it out without even using any meters. If you might want to get a magnifying glass, but it can be figured out. So that's how you do that if you have the data available on what pin is what. Again, be mindful that 5 volts. We don't want to tap into that 5 volts. And then in this case, if we hold the connector the way the picture shows, the 5 volts is going to be more. Let me get this back here now. It looks like the 5 volts is going to be, let's focus this. Looks to be, let me check here. But you got to be mindful of that so you do not. Okay, so the 5 volts on this particular one is going to be up here. So let's get this out. And the 5 volts is this pin right here. So we want to stay away from that one because we don't need to use that. That's a 5 volts. If you're going by the pinout on this particular model, let me go back to it. Because remember, the Retevis RT97S has it in their book, owner's manual. So if you go by that, that's how you can easily look at a connector and try to figure out the pins when you have the information in front of you. Now, if you don't have the information in front of you and the manufacturer doesn't email you back or whatever the case may be, then you got to do the other route. The other route's a little bit more of a pain. It's not terrible, but you will need, let me go ahead and go to my down camera. You're going to need a multimeter. You can buy them cheap. Right here I got the multimeter. You can buy them cheap at Harbor Freight. Any hardware store may have them. We're going to need the voltmeter and the ohm function. Now, I'm not going to go into great depth. You can use YouTube to look up how to use a meter. I'll kind of give you some basics here on how to do this. But my meter is a little more fancier. I can put the display on the screen. So whatever you see here, you'll see in your corner of your TV there. So when I have this, right now I have it on volts. You can see where it says volts over here. When I put it on ohms, which is the horseshoe, upside down horseshoe, you can see it where it says ohms. Now, when we do this, we're going to do what they call a continuity check. What all that means is when you take your meter probes, and this is, you always want to do this to make sure the meter's working properly and it's set up. You touch them together and it should show 0 ohms on the display. You can see it both displays here. Sometimes my on-screen display does not catch up fast enough. That's why I'm showing you both, because sometimes my on-screen display gets kind of weird. But at any rate, that's ohms. We want continuity. When you undo it, it goes back to that. The reason being, because we're going to trace, by doing that, we're going to trace the path of the pins. So let me explain what I mean by that. So we're going to use, for a good example that you can kind of see this, is the microphone that comes with the Retevis RT91 amplifier. I did a video on that. And Retevis does not have the pinouts in their owner's manual for this microphone. So how did I figure it out? Well, the easiest way is you're going to take the microphone apart. So to save time, I'm going to take this apart. We're going to undo the cable. You pull the boot back. Remember, this particular microphone has an end on both ends. So we can unplug that. And the end that we are worried about is the RJ45 end, because that's what plugs into this microphone. The other end of that microphone is it's a smaller plug. It's an RJ11 or 12. We're going to take this microphone apart, which I took the screws out to save time here. Let me kind of get this, show you here. So when you take the screws out, it's going to look like this. Then you're going to need to pull the screws off for the circuit board. We got to remove the circuit board. And to do that, you lift up on this end, and then you lift it out this way. See how I do that? It's sitting like this. You tilt it up, and you pull it out this way. Once the board is out, now we got the board. Now, I'm doing this because this is kind of a simpler version of a microphone. You can apply this to your microphone, and I'll show you what I mean by this. This is this is the best way to show you with this microphone. So the first thing I want to do is, remember, we only need the PTT, ground, and microphone in. Now, the PTT, usually one end of the switch, this is the PTT switch right here. Usually one end of the switch goes to ground, and the other end of the switch goes to your connector. Okay, so if we want to figure this out, I'm gonna let's get the microscope out again. I apologize if this movie, if this video is going to be long. Sometimes that happens trying to explain this. So let's go ahead. We're going to redo my focus here. So here we go. Okay, so now we want the PTT button. So what we're going to do, this is the PTT button. We want to make sure, now you could do this two different ways. If you look closely on this, and it's kind of hard to show you, you can see, let me see if I can focus it a little bit better. There we go. You can see, this is a good example right here. Let's see if I get the light on here better. You can trace it back, actually. You see the trace here to the one side of the switch? This side here is going to be ground, I can just tell. But I'll show you how you can verify that. But if you trace this back, we're tracing this trace back. There's no connection here. Nothing's hooked up there. We're going to trace this back. We go to this part. This comes over here. We go to here. We're tracing this back. We go here. And it looks like it goes to this pin right here. This is the pin on the RJ45 plug. So now we just figured it out. What pin is PTT? See how I did that? We traced the trace back. This other side of the trace is ground. And we can double check that. And in this case, I can almost tell it's ground because the way that they have, it's this whole area is ground. But if you want to make sure, we got to find, now in this particular microphone, they do have a couple test points. That's, you probably can't read that, but it says ground. So with that being ground, I can take my meter, which if I flip this board around, it's going to be the top one. It's going to be this one right here. I can take my meter, put the probe there, and then touch the other probe to the other side of that switch. Let's adjust the, it's only bad about the digital microscopes. You got to, every time you move a board, it's got to be readjusted. So now if I take this and touch it here, I have continuity. My meter on the screen says 0. I know that's a ground connection. So I know that end goes to ground. We don't need to worry about that because we will have a ground wire that we'll be using. We need to worry about this wire, and that's the one I trace back. Now you could trace it with a meter too if you don't want to trace the actual traces. You can put your meter on this end here, and then go through and touch on the other probe till you get 0 ohms. That's how you can do that. I like using the, I kind of do both actually. I trace it back with the actual trace. Let's focus this better. So I trace it back with an actual trace, and then I verify it with my meters, how I do it. Okay? So that's how you do that. Now, the tricky part of doing this, when it comes to the microphone, we want the red wire or the plus. That's the mic in. We can't really, you can use your meter, but you're not going to get a 0 reading because usually the microphone has circuitry that's hooked up. So if I put my probe here and then I go on the back side and I start touching this and I find it where I get a reading, then I know that's a microphone. But for people who don't know that the reading will not be 0, you're going to have to trace it back. And to do that, we want the plus here. So it's going to be there. So I flip it around. It's going to be on the top. I actually kind of marked it here. And then now we trace it back. We look at this. Let me get this focused here. And we'll try to get this a little bit better here for you. There. So I know this is it right here. Right here. So I start tracing it back. Where does it go? Well, it goes underneath this part and it goes to here. And then I trace the trace and it goes to this component, which is a resistor. On the other end of that resistor, it goes to here, and we're tracing it back. Okay, now it goes to this resistor, which hooks up to here, which hooks up to here. Then we trace it this way, and we go to here. It goes underneath this component, and it goes to here, and it goes to this spot right here, it looks like. So you can trace it that way. That's my mic in. So now you're wondering, okay, so let's say we get all this figured out on this RJ45. How do I translate that to my cable? Well, what you do is you plug this in. You plug this in. In this case, with this cable, you plug in. Now we're going to take a meter and we're going to go from the spot where we think it is, the PTT, we're going to touch it here, and then we're going to take our other meter probe and we're going to go to the connector that goes to the actual radio, and then we'll touch that in here on the connectors here. And once we get continuity, then I know, okay, this is it right here. Then I look to see what color of wire it is, like I mentioned before. Kind of hard to see this. Let's see if I can pull this back. You can kind of see that they only use 3 wires in this particular microphone. So let's say, for an example, my PTT ends up being on this connector. Well, that's a yellow wire. So now it's a yellow wire. So now I got to find the yellow wire on the RJ45. Remember, this is the Retevis RT91 amplifier. They do it a little differently. On one end of it, they have an RJ45. On the other end, they have an RJ11 or 12. So that's why we kind of got to do it kind of backwards. But then we find the yellow wire on here, on my RJ45, which is, looks like to be the middle. Now I know, now I can match it with my connector. Here's the original microphone. Here's my cable that I cut the other end off. Now I can match it. So let's say that yellow wire on the left-hand side looks to be, what is that, the 4th wire in from the right? Well, if I count the 4th wire in from the right, it's going to be whatever color that is. Kind of hard to see with the glare. But you kind of get where I'm going with this. So as long as you know what position on the original plug, we can figure out on the cable we're going to use what color. At the very end of that, we can figure out what color we're going to use. And that's what we're going to hook up to the interface board. So I'm hoping this kind of makes sense. I know it's kind of confusing, but let's look at a regular microphone. That's kind of not a regular microphone. That's because a regular microphone is going to have a keypad on it. Most microphones do when it comes to mobile radios. So let's grab a microphone here. And I got one here. I have the TYT9000 microphone. It's 9000D, I believe. So we're going to grab this. We're going to pull the screws out of this, which I already did ahead of time. Got the back off it. Now here's something interesting. Now this is why you want to do a visual inspection before you do anything else. This TYT, which is probably going to apply to the Retevis RT9000, the circuit board is marked. They have it marked. What I mean by that is, let's go ahead and move my other. What I mean by that is, if we look at this, we don't care about the keypad. We don't care about that. Again, we only care about the PTT, ground, mic in, and mic ground. So now let's go back to the microscope. And lucky for us, they were nice enough to mark the circuit board. Here's the wires that come in from the RJ45 connector. Okay, here's the, if you look at, let's go back here. If we go to the cable, this is where it comes into inside the microphone. We're going to look at this connector here. So if we look at that, they were nice enough to mark it for us. Look at that. PTT ground. So always check look visually before when you take the microphone apart, look to see if it's already marked. In this case, it is. So this is the beauty of it. They just saved me a lot of time. So now if I look at this, it looks like, okay, and if you want to know what all this means, mic G means mic ground. Mic means mic in. Ground and PTT. Now this is going to have a 5-volt wire. The reason being is because you got to power the keypad on the microphone. So be mindful of that. In this case, they say 5C, but it's 5 volts. So we want to stay away from that wire. So we just wanted the ground. Usually the mic ground and the ground are the same connection. But if you want to play it safe, take the mic ground, and then on the interface board, you put those two wires together on the interface board. The mic ground and then the regular ground. But in this case, we can tell yellow wire looks like mic ground, looks to be, what is that? A black wire, it looks like. And then mic in looks to be a white wire. Let me kind of look at that from, yeah, that's what it looks like, a white wire. So now we know what colors. So now we do the same principle. We take the colors and we go back to the connector on the cable, on the mic cable. So in this case, if I hold the tab down, the tab is down. Now I take my connector that I want to use and I put it next to it. Now I can figure out the location. Now, so let's see if I can get all this in the camera here. So let's say I want to figure out, okay, microphone in, that looks to be the white wire. We could double check it with a meter, which I recommend you do. The white wire is going to be the microphone in. So if I find the white wire on this connector, well, to me it looks like it's going to be, with the tab facing down, it's going to be the third wire from the right is going to be the microphone in. Okay? So now, knowing that, if I put my cable next to it, okay, remember I said the third wire from the right. So if I use my cable, I'm going to go with the third wire to the right, and it looks like it's going to be, might be green there. Let me look at it closely here. Yeah, it's green. So my cable, the green wire is going to be the mic in. You see how we're kind of matching it? Once you find the location, what pin it is, now we can transfer that to the cable we're going to use. Because obviously the colors are going to be different because we're using a network cable. But we don't care what color the wire is. We just want to know what the location is. So third wire here, yellow. Third wire on my connector here, it's going to be green. So now I use the green wire. So now I take my connector, I find the green wire, and that's going to be my mic in. So that would hook up to the interface board under the mic in or the mic connector. So that's how you can trace it back. You can use an ohm meter to verify it. So if I was to touch like this, let's go ahead and kind of show this. So if I put 1 meter lead on the green wire here, and then I put the other meter lead on the connector on the plug, and I read 0 ohms, that means I have a connection, and that means that is the wire that I want to use. So that's how we do that. So yeah, it's like the white wire is the one that is the microphone in, the white wire on here. So it's going to be the white wire on here. So now we can double check it with a meter. I always like double checking it with a meter because sometimes, you know, your eyes may misread something. So double check it, put it there, and then touch it on the other one, and it should read 0 ohms. I can't do that all with, you know, 2 hands here under the microscope, but you get where I'm going here. Once the main thing is figuring out the location on the original microphone and then transferring that to your cable. You count it over. So make sure you have the tabs facing the same way and you count it over. That's what we're basically doing. We're figuring it out on the original cable, and then we're going to use my cable and we just count over the same number of pins, and then we figure out what color of wire, and then that's the wire we're going to use on our cable, the one that we cut off the end that was the Cat 5. So I'm hoping this kind of helps get you an idea how to do this. Now, like I said, though, the one thing we want to be careful of is that 5 volt. So we want to stay away from that wire. And it looks like in this case, that 5 volt looks to be the blue wire. Now, I would double check that with a meter. And how you do that is you put your meter on volts, you plug in your mic cable into your radio, turn your radio on, your meter, one end of the meter goes to ground, which we know what ground pin it is because they're marked. So your black lead would go to ground, your ground pin, and then your red lead would touch or would go to the 5 volt, and just to verify you got 5 volts, that's how you would do that to verify with the meter. Like I said, I like to verify, even though I can trace it back with a magnifying glass, like I showed you, you trace the actual trace back to the pin. Even though you can do that, it's always best to double check it with an ohm meter. If you're checking continuity, or if you want to check a voltage, then you use a voltmeter. So that's how you do that. Like I said, for the interface board, we only care about PTT, microphone in, mic ground, and ground. Usually mic ground and ground are the same, but 4 wires technically. But the mic ground would hook up to the same ground on the interface board. So that's how you can trace them back if you cannot get the data from the manufacturer. Hopefully they'll email you. It makes it a little bit easier. And sometimes you pull a microphone apart, like I just showed you, they have it labeled in here. So that even makes it even easier yet. So always check, look around real close on the board to see what it might be labeled. That's going to save you a lot of time. So I'm hoping this video helps you. If you have any questions or comments, please post them down below. Please subscribe. Thank you and have a good day.